All right, what's up, guys? Today, we're going to be talking about the 10 most shocking UFC performances in recent memory. Now, I'm not talking about shocking in terms of the result of who won, but more so shocking in the way they did it in some instances where we maybe expected the guy to win, but not expect him to go out and do it like he did in the actual fight. So, let's get right into it. The first one today, I got Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo. Now, if you know, you know. This fight happened in 2015. They went on a world tour of press conferences with Conor McGregor just torturing Jose Aldo with trash talk, taking his belt in front of his crowd in Brazil. And yeah, this buildup was insane. Jose Aldo at the time was the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. And Conor McGregor was coming up in the featherweight division. He was destroying everybody in a round. And yeah, people thought that Jose Aldo would probably beat him just because he was the number one pound for pound fighter in the world. But as the fight got closer, the odds were flip-flopping and nobody knew it was really going to happen. But man, this fight, the build up to this fight was insane. Jose Aldo actually pulled out in the first fight due to a rib injury, and McGregor had to step in to face Chad Mendes for the interim belt. He beats Chad Mendes for the interim belt, and then the fight is rebooked for UFC 194. And yeah, they have a couple more press conferences. Then the fight comes, and man, you see Aldo in the cage swinging his arm back and forth. He looks nervous in the cage. And then the fight starts, and boom, Conor McGregor KOs Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. One of the most insane moments in UFC history. Still the fastest knockout in title fight history. And yeah, this was an interesting result for me. It kind of made the fight feel like it was not complete, if you know what I mean. Like, I always felt like I wanted to see these two fight past 13 seconds, you know? And looking back, I do think Conor McGregor would have eventually won, but I want to see how it would have played out if it wasn't a 13-second KO. Nonetheless, this was one of the most shocking moments and performances in UFC history, in my opinion. So yeah, had to put this on this list. Let's move on to the next one. We got Chris Weidman versus Anderson Silva 1. Now, this was insane. In the fight, it looked like Anderson Silva was just kind of clowning on Chris Weidman, like playing with his food, you know, because Anderson Silva is known to showboat on his opponents. He was on his 10th title, going for his 11th title defense, and people were like, man, it's Anderson Silva. This little young kid, Chris Weidman, ain't going to do jack squat. So Anderson's dancing around the cage, you know, hitting the shuffle on Chris Weidman, and then, yeah, he gets hit by a shot, kind of does a little dance, and then Chris Weidman clips him on the chin. He falls to the ground, and Chris Weidman's crowned the new champion. And this was really the end of an era. Anderson Silva was on top of the middleweight division from 2006 all the way to 2013. So to see this happen was quite insane. And it really felt like a fluke. People wanted to see the rematch. And in the rematch, Anderson breaks his leg. So honestly, the whole Anderson versus Weidman fight never felt like definitive, despite Weidman getting the knockout and then winning the second fight by a leg break. I will say during the fights, Weidman did look like the better fighter, but it was a shocking performance in the first Anderson Silva fight, just because even though everyone knew Anderson was probably going to eventually lose because he was 38 years old at the time, no one thought he was going to get like KO'd the way he did by Weidman. And yeah, Weidman KO'd Anderson Silva back in 2013, ended his reign and started his own reign. And yeah, this was a shocking performance for me just because not many people expected it to happen at the time. Let's move on to the next one on the list. We got Michael Bisping versus Luke Rockhold 2. Now, this one was funny because Michael Bisping was like, had to do, and it was originally supposed to be Luke Rockhold versus Chris Weidman 2 for a rematch for the belt. Well, Chris Weidman gets injured, and Michael Bisping steps up on 2 weeks' notice at UFC 199 to face Luke Rockhold. Now, people were so confident, including myself, that Michael Bisping was going to get destroyed because he had already lost to Luke Rockhold 2 years prior. He got head kicked and then choked out by Luke Rockhold. So, and Bisping at this point, stepping in on 2 weeks' notice, he was like 37 years old. People in their mind were like, man, Bisping, he's a journeyman. He's never going to get to the belt. This is just going to be another easy defense for Rockhold. And man, was everyone wrong, including myself. Talk about a shocking performance. Michael Bisping in the very first round catches Luke Rockhold on the chin, left hook Larry, sits him down, and follows up with a couple shots to the chin. And yeah, Luke Rockhold goes down, and Michael Bisping becomes the middleweight champion. One of the worst champions in UFC history, just because the way he went about his title reign. But nonetheless, he became the UFC champion by knocking out Luke Rockhold. And yeah, he took Luke Rockhold's soul. Luke Rockhold was never quite the same after that. But to be fair, Luke Rockhold never really had a good chin. I mean, maybe Vitor Belfort with that spinning kick took his chin. Either way, Michael Bisping, KO, and Luke Rockhold to become the champion was quite a shocking moment in UFC history. And yeah, the build up to this fight, despite only being 2 weeks, was very entertaining. But yeah, I had to put this on this list just because nobody thought Michael Bisping was going to knock out Luke Rockhold. Everyone thought Luke Rockhold was going to destroy him. So this was a shocking performance for me. Let's move on to the next one. We got Amanda Nunes versus Chris Cyborg. Now, listen, this was quite interesting. At the time, Chris Cyborg was on, I think, a 19-fight win streak whenever she fought Nunes, and she was undefeated for like 10 years. Something like that. It was quite insane. I don't think people thought that it was impossible for Nunes to get it done, but the shocking nature of seeing her KO Chris Cyborg out cold in their fight. They had some back and forth exchanges in the fight, cracking each other, and then Nunes cracked Cyborg quite a few times, and then there was a moment where she just hit her on the chin, I believe, with a right hand, and Cyborg went down, and Nunes just turned around, and boom, Amanda Nunes, the new GOAT of women's MMA. Nah, she probably already was the GOAT. But for real, Amanda Nunes finished every UFC bantamweight champion. She has a win over, not finished, but beat. She has a win over Juliana Pena. She has a win over Chris Cyborg, a win over Holly Holm, a win over Miesha Tate, and a win over Ronda Rousey. So quite crazy that Amanda Nunes has, and Raquel Pennington. She's beat every UFC bantamweight champion. That's quite insane. But yeah, to see her KO Chris Cyborg, for me, was quite shocking. Just because Chris Cyborg, like the aura around her, like Dana said, she looked like Vanderlei in a dress and heels. So to see Amanda Nunes KO her was quite surreal for me at the time. Quite shocking, but not surprising, but shocking, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I have this on this list. Let's move on up to the next one. We got Nate Diaz versus Conor McGregor 1. I'm not surprised, motherfuckers. Now listen, Conor McGregor at the time was literally on top of the world. He had just KO'd Jose Aldo, the pound-for-pound #1 fighter, in 13 seconds. He was supposed to fight RDA for the lightweight belt, going up a weight class. RDA pulls out, and the Conor McGregor is called to fight none other than Nate Diaz on 10 days' notice. Nate Diaz steps up, coming off of what he said was a marathon sprint. He was sprinting. He was in shape. You know, Nate Diaz always stay in shape, train to kill. And then they drop a press conference between these two. Super entertaining. But let's be real. Everyone thought that Conor McGregor was just going to piece up journeyman Nate Diaz. It was going to be an easy fight for McGregor. He was running through everybody in the UFC, and he was going to KO. I don't know if people thought he was going to KO Nate Diaz. I did. Maybe that was the inner casual in me back then. But man, the fight starts, and it looks like Conor McGregor is piecing up Nate Diaz. He's having his way with him. But Nate Diaz is staying in there, and bloodied Nate Diaz as he does. Gasses Conor McGregor out after the first round. McGregor's throwing heat, hitting Nate with some good shots, and then in the second round, a gassed out McGregor gets tagged on the feet. He shoots a takedown on Nate Diaz, and yeah, Nate Diaz locks up at some point. He locks up a rear naked choke, sinks it in, and yeah, McGregor taps. And yeah, I'm not surprised, motherfuckers. And Nate Diaz, the star, was born. This was one of the most shocking moments in UFC history. Nate Diaz, the second guy to submit Conor McGregor, but the first guy to beat him in the UFC. And McGregor was on like a 17-fight win streak at this point. So this was quite insane of a win for Nate Diaz. Definitely shot him up in the superstardom. I definitely didn't see this one coming. It was shocking to me. So definitely had to throw this one on this list. Let's move on to the next one. We got Jorge Masvidal versus Ben Askren. Now, I'm not surprised that Jorge Masvidal won, but I'm surprised that he got a fucking 5-second sprinting flying knee and KO'd Ben Askren nearly immediately into the fight. Everyone, or at least a good bit of people, thought that Ben Askren was just going to wrestle hump Jorge into a decision. Ben Askren, we knew he had awful striking, but he had come from Bellator and won. He was a multiple promotional champion in both of those. He had a run in Bellator undefeated. He had a run in one undefeated. So despite not having the best striking, people thought that he would be able to take Jorge Masvidal down and just kind of do what he wanted to him on the ground. But Masvidal starts the fight with his hands behind his back, kind of leaning against the cage. Fight starts. He literally sprints across the octagon and Ben Askren goes in for a takedown and runs right into Masvidal's knee, KO'd in 5 seconds, the fastest KO in UFC history. I think I just sat with my jaw like dropped for a good like 2 minutes after this happened. I had to watch the replay several times. I was like, there's no way that just happened. It's like UFC fighters all the time try these like silly moves, like flying knees off the rip, like throwing kicks to the face. But to see it actually land and then knock the guy out in 5 seconds was crazy. Like I said, I'm not surprised that Jorge Masvidal beat Ben Askren. It was more shocking the way he did it. Being that Ben Askren was undefeated, had never been KO'd before, had an insane chin. So to see Ben Askren just get KO'd like that was crazy. And yeah, Jorge Masvidal, this was his shot into superstardom. And this lead him into the BMF title fight with Nate Diaz, and then eventually a title shot against Kamaru Usman 2 times. So yeah, had to put this on this list just because of the shocking nature of a 5-second KO in the UFC. Still the fastest to this day. It's going to be very hard to beat. I mean, how do you KO somebody in 5 seconds? That's insane. So next on the list, we got Leon Edwards versus Kamaru Usman 2. Now, everyone knows why this was a shocking performance by Leon. Not because he beat Kamaru Usman. I think people in the back of their mind thought that Leon had a chance to beat Kamaru Usman. He was younger. He was on like a 10-fight, 11-fight unbeaten streak. And yeah, they had fought before, and Usman dominated Leon Edwards back in 2015. But they were set for the rematch 7 years later. And man, in the rematch, it looked like Usman just picked up where he left off. He was dominating Leon Edwards, just kind of marching forward, just doing what he wanted to him, bullying Leon. And yeah, Leon getting destroyed for 4 rounds. Had a moment in the first round where he took Usman down, I believe. But outside of that, it was all Usman. And in the 5th round, Leon looks mentally checked out. The commentators are saying that Leon's just trying to make it to decision for a moral victory. And what do you know? He lands a beautiful same-side combination head kick, punch to head kick on Usman, KOs him out cold, ends Usman's 15-fight undefeated streak in the UFC, and becomes the new welterweight champion. And then he follows it up and beats Usman in the trilogy, showing it was no fluke. And maybe it was just the Salt Lake City air that made him tired, you know, because they're at elevation over there. And yeah, the fights can make the fighters very tired when you're fighting at, I think, 5,000 feet above elevation. But this was shocking because anytime you see a guy, this was literally what we call a Hail Mary win. Like, Leon Edwards was losing the entire fight. He was getting bullied, getting destroyed, and he lands a head kick right at the end to KO Usman and become the champion. I don't think anyone saw this coming. This looked like Kamaru Usman was just going to coast to another 5-round dominant decision and continue his title reign, but Leon Edwards took his soul, and yeah, good win by Leon Edwards despite being one of the most boring champions. Real ones miss Kamaru as champion. He was the best welterweight champion we had in a while. Active, fighting every 3 months, it seemed like. Either way, this was a shocking moment in UFC history just because, like I said, Usman up 4 rounds to 1. Leon gets the head kick, takes the belt. Insanity. Let's move on to the next one. Sean Strickland versus Israel Adesanya. Now, I've gone on record to say that Israel Adesanya is an overrated striker. Fair enough, but I do still think Israel Adesanya is an amazing striker, and he's a better striker than Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland is a boxer that throws teep kicks and throws jabs for 5 rounds, and he was able to use that style. Listen, going into this fight, Israel Adesanya looked emotional at the press conference against Sean Strickland, but everyone thought that Israel Adesanya would come in this fight with a chip on his shoulder like he did against other guys in recent memory, like he did against Alex Pereira in the rematch. He would come with a chip on his shoulder, and Strickland, who talked all this trash, would not be able to hold a candle to the striking of Izzy. And what do you know? The fight starts, and Strickland uses his heavy pressure style, scores a knockdown in the first round against Izzy. And people thought, oh shit, is Strickland going to finish Israel Adesanya? But yeah, Strickland goes on to completely dominate Izzy on the feet. Insanity. I could not believe what I was watching. Everybody thought that Israel Adesanya would just destroy Sean Strickland with counters and just piece him up to probably a 5-round butchering, but it was the exact opposite. Strickland just destroyed Izzy, and yeah, he pressured him the entire fight, and then even in the last 10 seconds, Sean Strickland's in Israel Adesanya's face, screaming at him, just throwing fights, because he knew he won the fight. And yeah, man, this was insane. I'd like to see a rematch between these two. It was a good fight, but we need to see Israel Adesanya get a win. He's on a little slump right now, but A rematch between these two. I want to see if Israel Adesanya could get the win over Strickland if he really did have an off night where he looked flat. But the shocking nature of this performance was because, not because, well, it was because Strickland won. It was also the way he did it. Just because, like, Strickland dominating Izzy on the feet where he's at his best was insane. But who knows? Maybe Izzy had an off night in a rematch. He would destroy Strickland. I don't know. This seems like a tough matchup for Izzy, given what we know now. But yeah, in the moment when it happened, this was quite shocking for me. Let's move on to the second to last one on this list. Max Holloway versus Justin Gaethje. Now, you guys know the narratives going into this fight. Gaethje was coming off the knockout against Poirier, I believe, where he just knocked him out for the BMF belt the July prior. So the narrative was, well, when Max Holloway fought Poirier up at lightweight, Poirier was too strong, he was too big, Max would be too small, Gaethje would be too powerful, and Max Holloway would just get pieced up by Justin Gaethje the entire fight. And it would be a mistake for Max Holloway's career. He might even get KO'd for the first time. Boy, was that narrative wrong. Max Holloway starts the fight, a spinning back kick to Justin Gaethje's nose, bust his nose up. And then from there, he just puts on an absolute clinic on Justin Gaethje. And here's what makes it shocking. It was already shocking to see Max Holloway piecing up Justin Gaethje the entire fight. Like, it was insane. But literally with 1 second in a 5-round fight at UFC 300, literally on the biggest stage of the year, maybe even in UFC history, for the BMF belt, Max Holloway points to the ground with 10 seconds to go and slugs it out with Justin Gaethje and literally KOs him with 1 second to go. Like, how insane is that? At UFC 300, this happens. Like, you literally couldn't have painted a better result for this fight to end in. Max Holloway's on top of the world, screaming over Justin Gaethje's slump body, saying I am him, calls out Ilia Topuria on the mic after. It was just surreal. Like, I could not believe what I just saw. Like, we've seen Justin Gaethje KO'd before, but to get it done with 1 second to go by Max Holloway, who isn't known to have the most power, was insane. And yeah, guys, you already know this was a shocking performance. Speaking of Max Holloway, this happened just recently. The last one on this list, Max Holloway versus Ilia Topuria. Listen, people thought that Topuria was going to win. I didn't. I thought Max Holloway was going to eke out a decision. But a lot of people, most people thought Topuria was going to win. They thought he would be too good. Max Holloway going back down to featherweight. The weight cut was going to get to him. Topuria had too much power. But listen, it's not shocking that Ilia won. The fashion that he did it in. Max Holloway going into this fight went 29 UFC fights without even being dropped, much less KO'd. I myself thought that Ilia Topuria would not be able to KO Max. I was like, you know what? Topuria just came off of a win off of Volkanovski, but Volkanovski's chin was softened up by Makhachev, and before that, he had a win over Josh Emmett and couldn't KO Josh Emmett, a 38-year-old Josh Emmett. There's no way he's going to KO Max Holloway, literally the king of not being KO'd, the most hit fighter in UFC history, Max Holloway. There's no way that Ilia Topuria is going to KO him. He'll win by a decision, but he's not going to get a knockout. But man, were we wrong. Max Holloway versus Topuria. While this fight was going, I was on the edge of my seat. It did seem like Topuria was getting the better of the exchanges, but it looked like Max was hanging in there. And yeah, I was cringing a little bit. I was like, oh, is Max going to get caught? Is Max going to get caught? And then boom, in the third round, I think Ilia Topuria hits him with a left hook and follows up with ground and pound shots. And yeah, Max Holloway goes out. Surreal to see. Like I said, I'm not shocked that Topuria won. I'm shocked that he got a knockout versus Max Holloway just because Max Holloway had never been KO'd in his entire career. And he also had the record for 29 UFC fights without being knocked out. That was a record that still stands. But yeah, it's now been over. He was chinned by Ilia Topuria. It was sad to see, man. My boy Max Holloway, I was hoping he could at least last to the decision. We didn't have to see him get KO'd like that. But nonetheless, Ilia Topuria showed he was the real deal. Best boxing in the UFC. First guy to chin Max Holloway. Said he would do it. He did it. So respect to Topuria. And yeah, guys, that's the list. As I said, this was geared more towards not so much the result of the fight being shocking, but how the person got it done. That's what this list was about. So if you enjoyed the video today, guys, drop a like, drop a sub on the channel, drop a comment, let me know what was a shocking moment in recent memory for you. And I always appreciate you guys watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.